In this episode of Militaria at the museum, we rediscover D-Day letters penned by an officer on the eve of one of history's most significant military operations. Next, we turn to the uniform of Colonel Gustavus Nichols, one of the many British engineers who played a crucial role in designing Fort George, better known as the Citadel. Finally, we examine a First World War rotary engine, which were aptly dubbed the Kings of the Sky. These engines powered the world's first air combat missions in the dawn of aerial warfare. Beyond museum exhibits lies a hidden realm of archived artifacts that hold the keys to unlocking intriguing stories from the past. Come along as I meet with experts at the Army, Naval, and Aviation museums, where I've been granted special access to pull back the curtains and reveal the secrets of their militaria. My name is Sandy Hiltz, and all my life I've been captivated by military history. Now, I have the rare opportunity to explore a collection of fascinating military artifacts on Militaria at the museum. Today at the Navy Museum, we're exploring the personal letters of Captain Harold Tilley, a Royal Canadian Navy officer who served during the Second World War. These D-Day letters offer a rare, intimate glimpse into the experiences of an officer during one of history's most critical moments. Just how valuable are these primary sources such as Tilley's to our understanding of D-Day?
From a historical perspective, extremely valuable. Primary sources such as Tilley's letters are the actual lived experiences of people who were there.
You certainly seem to have a good handle on where things are, Jen.
I do. I spent a lot of time in here. Oh, by the way, I might have a surprise for you.
Oh, I love surprises. This is a wonderful spread of materials we have before us, but can you tell me a little bit more about who Harold Tilley was?
Absolutely. Harold Tilley was a midshipman that joined the Royal Canadian Navy in 1941. From 1941 to 1944, he served on a series of HMS Royal Navy ships. Then as he approached 1944, he went back to the UK and got his technical training course that qualified him to be a sub-lieutenant in the Royal Canadian Navy. And because he was in the UK just before they were launching Operation Overlord on June 6, 1944, he kind of was stuck in England. And so they said, oh, well, you finished your course. So, kind of tour around and we'll kind of get in touch with you to post you to a ship. So he went to the naval headquarters in London. He needed employment, he needed a cash flow, and he needed something to do. And they said, well, you know what, by chance, we have a position open on a landing craft headed for a mission. We need a navigator. So he was assigned to landing craft LCI 263, which was part of the 2nd Flotilla of the Canadian Infantry for D-Day. Harold Tilley has a very interesting story when it comes to the Royal Canadian Navy and his service. He was trained in the UK as a midshipman, ended up serving on a series of Royal Navy ships, and joined the Royal Canadian Navy in 1941.
So had Harold Tilley not shown up at that office just needing some employment, he likely wouldn't have been involved in the D-Day landings.
He most definitely would have not.
What is in these letters relating to D-Day?
So what's interesting about these two sets of letters, the first letter is written when he had been just assigned to the landing craft. So he's writing home to his mom and dad saying, so I was supposed to come home and visit you, but it turns out I'm posted to this landing craft. I don't know what it's doing or where it's going, but this is my new posting, so I will not be coming home. 3 days after D-Day on June 9th, he wrote another letter home saying, so you know that landing craft I was assigned to, as you pretty well figured out, it was part of the invasion in Normandy. And he was writing home to say, I'm okay. I'm still here. It all went well. Please don't worry. Very vague details were given to him about the mission, and it wasn't really until the couple of days or the day before they left Southampton for the beaches in Normandy that they would have been informed of what their mission was.
Is there anything particularly unique about Tilley's experience in these letters?
Absolutely. In his letters home, he does document the process that he went through navigating the landing craft. They left Southampton, England, landed at Juno Beach, and he describes not only the condition of the ship, but the crew, the landing process itself, just I guess you could call it complete chaos, organized chaos of all the ships landing, the people, the tanks, the noise, the planes. They had run over a series of booby traps and mines coming into the beach, which punched a bunch of holes into the landing craft. So they had to immediately go back to Juno Beach. He had to beach the craft onto the beach to save the landing craft. And they were stuck there for a week doing repairs. So Sandy, I had meant to have a bit of a surprise that I was going to show you if you'd like to see it.
Oh, I'd love to. So
this is a flare gun that Tilly picked up on Juno Beach. It's a German flare gun. When his crew were patrolling the ships, he came across it and picked it up as a souvenir.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that remarkable?
And I'm not sure why Tilly found this item particularly attractive to bring back home. He obviously found it to be significant or had a connection with it, but it was enough for him to bring it back home and to keep it his entire life. If you look here at this map, which is actually one of the maps from Operation Neptune, which are the naval orders of the day, you can see just the scope of the entire coastline that was being assaulted on Operation Overlord. So here you have Juno, where the Canadians landed. Here you have Gold and Sword, which is where the British and the Americans were over here at Omaha. So it was quite a large stretch of land. So you have all these multiple ships, different troops coming in at different points and different times, all happening at once. So you can imagine just across this entire stretch, there would have been hundreds of ships, thousands of people. So that alone does give you an idea of the scope of how detailed this operation had to be, how well planned it had to be. I mean, for Canada alone, we had 10,000 sailors participate in Operation Overlord and over 100 ships. And it was amazing that it did successfully happen the way that it did. What makes Tilly's letters very significant is not only does it document D-Day itself, it documents a very human experience of war. He was a young man of 21, missing home, writing home to his parents. And through those letters, you can see that he had genuine concern about his concerns about being involved in the war.
That's interesting. So it's personal experience, but it's very representative of the experiences of many of the people that would have been there that day.
Absolutely.
After the landing craft had been repaired, where was Tilly off to next?
So once his landing craft had been repaired, his orders were to go back to the UK. And when he was heading back, he brought back people who were wounded, but also POWs.
But how does he spend the rest of his war?
Finally got his posting on a Royal Canadian Navy ship. He was posted to HMCS Huron until the end of the war. And then as soon as the war was over, he continued his service for the next 39 years in the Royal Canadian Navy.
Really? So it was an entire lifetime spent in the Navy for him.
Absolutely. Tilly's Royal Canadian Navy career started with D-Day. A wonderful career. Almost 30 plus years, Harold Tilly was involved in the Royal Canadian Navy. And even after his retirement, he was still very involved in the Legions and the community around the Navy.
And are these the only remnants you have of Tilly's career, or do you have a more extensive collection relating to him?
Actually, we're very fortunate. We have much more Tilly content in our collection. The family has been very generous in providing that. So Tilly went on to serve in the Korean War, and then of course we have his service leading up to unification. And so yeah, we've got quite a breadth of his whole life in the Navy here at the museum.
Jen, thank you so much for showing me this wonderful archive today. It's been very interesting to dig into the personal story of Tilly, but also realize how representative it is of the story of the many young men that went over and landed there that day.
Absolutely. I'm so glad I got to show it to you.
Coming up next, we'll explore a British engineer's uniform and the story of Colonel Gustavus Nichols, the Royal Engineer whose contributions gave us the iconic Halifax Citadel. At the Army Museum, we're exploring a British engineer's uniform similar to that worn by Colonel Gustavus Nichols. As the commanding Royal Engineer in Halifax, Nichols oversaw the construction of key fortifications like the Citadel, leaving a lasting impact on Halifax's military landscape. Kevin, I've heard of this Chief Engineer Nichols, but I'm wondering what sort of lasting impact he has on the city of Halifax.
Well, Gustav Nichols is here throughout the early 19th century. And in terms of a lasting symbol of his time or presence, we're standing in it right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Cavalier Building is one of the designs for the first citadel that's still here.
What a treat it is to see a uniform of this age, Kevin. It seems to be in a remarkable state of preservation given its age.
This is the type of coatee that the British Army is wearing in the wake of the time of Napoleon. So in 1817, there is a change in headgear, the cut of uniforms. So the coatee isn't necessarily new, per se, in 1817 by any stretch, but it's the cut. So it's tailored more like a French uniform from the time of Napoleon that Napoleon's army would wear. The collar is just a little bit higher as well. But this is a coatee is worn by officers of the Corps of Engineers. Yeah.
Right, and tell me, how rare is a uniform such as this?
Well, I don't think there's one in the National Collection for the Canadian Park Service. There might be one in Ottawa at the National Army Museum, but this is like a regular British Army officers Corps of Engineers. So it's pretty rare. It's never been on exhibit since it came here. So having it here on the program and being able to share this artifact with people, with the viewers, a great opportunity to share that.
And this is, of course, not one of Nichols' personal uniforms, but it is just like one he would have worn. But what can you tell me about Nichols himself?
Gustav Nichols is born October 24th, 1779. And he enters the military academy at Woolwich when he's a teenager. He's a commissioned member of the Royal Engineers. By the time he's, 21, 22? He will spend an awful lot of his time here in North America, especially here in the city of Halifax. So through his period here, whether he's a captain or a major, he is the chief engineer in the city for the British garrison. Again, always this thing about the garrison town of Halifax, right? Its fortifications. So his time period here in the city is he worked and would have been active with the 3rd Citadel, which is the fort on the hill from the time of Napoleon and the War of 1812. Nichols actually oversees the demolition of the 3rd Citadel, its removal. He's here and with that, tearing it apart, moving the earth and whatnot. He also served and worked on the Citadel. He worked on the Citadel in Quebec City. He's part of the engineering program at Fort Henry in Kingston, Fort Erie. So he's all over what was then British North America. Colonel Gustav Nichols was, again, during the period here in Halifax, the construction of this citadel, this Fort George. He was the chief engineer here in this military district, which would have included Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and the island of Newfoundland, sort of embroidered into the fabric of life in the city and in the region as well.
We know of Nichols mainly as an architect of fortifications, but what other sort of works would he do, Kevin?
Well, when he is stationed in Ontario, or Upper Canada, as it would be called back then, again, I mentioned about Fort Henry, Fort York, Fort Erie, but he also does up plans for the first lighthouse on Lake Ontario.
This would have been a tremendous effort to be doing this sort of work. What were the sort of challenges that Nichols and his team would have encountered?
Well, one of the things is building a permanent stone fortification like this in North American conditions. The most vital part of the citadel, whatever variation it is on the hill, it's always the west front. Okay, the citadels always protect the back door of an attack potentially coming off the northwest arm. The west front are the first elements of the walls to be built. So eventually, they begin construction in 1828, but it's in the winter, I think, of 1831, 32, that the sort of realities of North America kick in. The revetment and the wall for the west front is a little too thin to hold the weight of the earth. So on one night, half the wall came down, and then the very next night, the other walls the rest of the wall came down. So they lost an entire year's work over the course of 2 frosty, cold evenings.
And after the completion of the 4th Citadel, how long would the fortification go on to serve as a means of protection of the city of Halifax?
Well, that's the thing, is by 1855, the fort is, it's finished and it's still, how could you say, viable in terms of the type of artillery it would be built to defend from. But a big transition happens in the wake of the American Civil War. The American Ordnance Corps, the U.S. government, the Army, etc., they are the first to deploy in large numbers rifled artillery. So this fort is designed to withstand impacts from smoothbore artillery that fire round shot. So when you look at the masonry here and around the walls, that's what's known as bonded masonry, so it's all together. At a place called Fort Pulaski, during the siege of Fort Pulaski in the southern United States, named after the cavalry officer that helps the Continental Army. Fort Pulaski falls in 6 days instead of 6 weeks. So overnight, forts like this all over the world that are built to withstand impacts from round shot prior to the introduction of rifle artillery, they're obsolete. We can't escape the fact that this is our heritage, and these forts are a living legacy to the work that these people did. A lot of the labor and work that goes into it is done by civilians, not just by soldiers. But at the same time, it's important for people to know these things, I think, and most would agree, I think, that they made an enormous contributions to the advancement of what would become Canada.
Kevin, thank you for showing me this uniform and this plan today. It's certainly a privilege to be able to see a uniform of this age and rarity. It's also wonderful to be able to go back and look at the lasting legacy of Nichols and to understand a bit more about the man who created the building we're standing in.
Engineers build the world. His echo is still here, as will be the ones that preceded him and come after us.
They certainly are.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Coming up next, I'm heading to the Aviation Museum, where we'll explore the revolutionary First World War rotary engine, technology that gave fighter pilots unmatched agility and speed in the skies. At the Aviation Museum, we're examining the First World War rotary engine, an innovation that transformed fighter aircraft. Its rotary cylinder design gave planes exceptional agility and speed, crucial for aerial combat. This painting depicts what is such an exciting period of aviation history, those dogfights of the First World War. But Mark, one thing that's always left me sort of curious is how they managed to fire those machine guns through the propellers without hitting them.
Another technologically advancement that you see in the First World War is the interrupter gear, which was basically a gear that was created that prevented the guns firing at the same point that the propeller spun around in front of the guns. It was obviously technologically harder with 2 machine guns. In this case, the Sup with Camel has 2 machine guns, but early examples centered on that first gun. The rotary engine was an innovation that we certainly see throughout the First World War, and it's something that today has got the roots of even jet engines in it. So we actually have an example of that rotary engine on display, and I'd like to show you that.
I'd love to see that.
Okay, well, let's go look.
Mark, that model there is sort of what we think of when we think of those great dogfights of the First World War. That plane has an inline engine, but the engine itself we're looking at is a rotary engine. Those are coming at about the same time. Why do we have those 2 different technologies?
Basically, technology is driving change, and what we're seeing is the forefront of engine technology at that particular point in, say, early 1914, 1915. We're seeing a confluence of inline versus rotary engine. So again, we're looking at all these sort of issues that are faced with engine designers. So you want your weight kept down so you don't have that thrust to weight ratio is higher. So you're not really dragging yourself because you're dragging a boat anchor on the front of your aircraft. That's kind of what it looks like.
Mark, what was the main reason for the innovation that led from the inline engine to the rotary engine?
What we see here with the Clerisy is that it was able to basically produce enough horsepower, not be assessed like a boat anchor hanging on the front of that aircraft. It could actually provide better thrust to weight ratio. But as aircraft got bigger and the demands of the aircraft changed, that's where the technology obviously dies off.
Did the Germans have a similar technology?
Yes, this is a Clerisy engine, and it was a French design, but this particular one was built by the British using that design. The French had been strong advocates of the rotary engines, and that technology had transferred to the German side, and they used similar engines, particularly like the Fokker triplane we have here, which uses an engine called an Oberursel engine, very similar to a Lerone engine at that point. The rotary engine was used by the Allied forces, and it was used by the Imperial German Army as well. The rotary engine and inline engines were all used side by side, each having its own advantages to it. But essentially it was this, if the thrust to rate ratio was better and improved, that would give them more power and the ability to use a rotary engine versus a inline engine was the big issue. They could actually change between the choice, depending on what the aircraft was doing. So the heavier the aircraft, the more likely they would look at to have a heavier thrust and also a heavier engine, which would probably mean they would use inline engines in it.
And so we move from the inline to the rotary. Where do we end up after that?
Well, we move to radial engines in a sense, where you've got an engine that's, now the internal components are moving, not just the entire engine is moving with it. So you'll see similar designs throughout the 20s and 30s, which are called the radial engine. But in addition, inline is being developed as well too. So you've got inline engines of up to 12 cylinders that are creating that, give you that sort of V-shaped block that's designed here.
Mark, what were the drawbacks of this version of the rotary engine?
The biggest drawbacks is you've only got one speed, and you're only getting, on this case, probably 130 horsepower out of it, and the pilot would have to manage that. Basically, a ground person would take the engine, spin it, start it up, and you're at one go. So you literally spin it, and off you take off with it. All the oil you used was pretty much thrown at the pilot or around the cowling by the end of the flight. You had to basically land the aircraft by using literally a light switch to blip the engine on and off. So you could flip the switch to cut it, and it would sort of reduce the power. And in order to land, you basically flip this switch a number of times to slow it down.
So we've started with the inline, we've gone to rotary, which has then been replaced with the radial, but we've kept the inline technology. So where do we go after that radial technology?
So what we see is a change of engine sizes. So we can have radials that are providing 3,000 horsepower, not the 160 you've got before. And in a relatively short space of time, we're only probably talking about 25 to 30 years, we're seeing such a tremendous leap from bigger radial engines. But now they're providing so much more horsepower, and they're a more contained unit. Jet technology really is 1930, when initial experimentation with jet engines is even then. And a number of them, in the case of Sir Frank Whittle, who is sort of the grandfather of jet development, he was in the RAF earlier. He was involved in the early engine development, and he saw as early as 1931, he'd seen the future was with sort of jet-powered and turbines and creating that more sort of force from turbine technology. At the end of World War II, the Germans were experimenting with jet technology, and also obviously the Italians had been in it, and of course the British and Americans were all in it. So by 1945, jet technology was providing it for aircraft to fight.
It's quite incredible. We talk about how quickly war makes things evolve. You know, we've gone from 1903, the first flight, to the mid-1940s, just a little over 40 years from that first flight to jet engines. I mean, that's an incredibly short amount of time.
I mean, the early jet engines have very limited time on them, you know, maybe 300 hours before they required servicing work. What we have here with the rotary engine is the fact that we have an engine that is sort of it's the pinnacle of design of its time, but it's going to provide the impotence to bring more modern technologies. You can almost say that jet technology sort of started with the rotary engine in a sense that it's a spinning turbine, and that comes right through and provides that sort of impetus that we see to design and create more thrust to power ratio, and the jet engine is that.
Mark, thank you so much for taking me through those innovations from the early days of flight, through the First World War inline and rotary engines, and then up until where we are today with the jet engine.
Oh, you're welcome. What we see today with the rotary engine is that it's a significant piece of technology that is underrepresented in lots of cases today.
Having special access to go beyond museum exhibits reveals some of history's best-kept secrets and most interesting stories. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of military artifacts on another episode of Militaria at the museum.